Let's cut through the noise because sugarcoating is exactly what keeps people stuck. If you're broke and overwhelmed right now, the problem isn't just money, it's clarity. Most people don't drown because they can't swim. They drown because they panic. And yeah, that panic shows up as late bills, maxed out cards, unopened emails, and that quiet knot in your stomach at 2 a.m. when the house is silent. You're not lazy, you're overloaded. But here's the hard part. Overload doesn't. Here's the truth. Nobody puts on a thumbnail. Being broke is rarely about income alone. Plenty of people make decent money and still feel crushed. What's really happening is decision fatigue. When everything feels urgent, nothing gets handled properly. So you bounce between apps, advice videos, and half-baked plans, hoping one magic tip fixes it all. Spoiler alert, it won't. Not because you're incapable, but because you're trying to sprint before you've learned how to stand still and see the terrain. Think about it like this. If your financial life were a messy room, most advice tells you to buy better furniture. That's insane. You don't need new shelves, you need to stop throwing stuff on the floor. Right now, your biggest enemy isn't low income, inflation, or the system. It's the constant mental chaos that keeps you reacting instead of choosing. When you don't know where your money goes, it feels like it disappears on its own, like a leak you can't find, only feel. And let's be honest for a second. You've probably told yourself some version of, once I make more, this stress will go away. That belief feels comforting, but it's a trap. More money without structure just makes the mess bigger and louder. The bills get larger, the stakes feel higher, and the fear scales up with your income. That's why the first step out of being broke doesn't feel exciting. It feels boring, even uncomfortable. And most people quit right there. This is where things start to shift, though. Because once you accept that overwhelm is the real problem, a different question appears. Not, how do I make more money fast? But, how do I regain control when everything feels out of control? That question changes where you look, what you ignore, and what you finally stop doing. And that's exactly where the next layer begins. The excuses we cling to and why letting them go feels scarier than staying broke. If you listen closely, excuses don't sound like lies, they sound reasonable. I don't make enough yet. Now isn't the right time. I'll deal with it after this month. Those phrases feel calm, almost responsible, but they slowly anesthetize urgency. You're not avoiding action because you don't care. You're avoiding it because caring too much hurts. Every excuse becomes a small painkiller, and just like real painkillers, they work great until the damage underneath gets worse. Here's the brutal part most people miss. Excuses don't protect you from failure. They protect you from clarity. The moment you fully admit, this is my responsibility, everything becomes heavier and sharper. You can't blame the economy, your boss, your family, or your past choices anymore. That weight feels terrifying, so the brain does what it does best. It negotiates. It says, just survive this month, then quietly repeats the deal next month. That's how years disappear while nothing actually changes. A mentor once explained it like quicksand, and it sticks for a reason. The harder you flail, the faster you sink. Excuses are flailing. They feel active, but they're panic disguised as movement. Watching another video, downloading another app, waiting for motivation. All of that feels productive while avoiding the one thing that matters, choosing a direction and accepting discomfort. Growth doesn't start when things feel safe. It starts when you decide discomfort beats stagnation. Let's ground this in something practical. If you don't know exactly how much money you have, how much you owe, and where the last 30 days went, you're not bad with money, you're avoiding data. And avoidance always disguises itself as overwhelm. One simple action, like listing every expense without judgment, can feel more painful than being broke itself. Why? Because numbers don't argue back. They don't negotiate. They just tell the truth. If this is the kind of clarity you've been looking for, the kind that actually makes things feel manageable, consider subscribing to the channel. These conversations go deeper, step by step, and they're built for real life, not hype. Turn on notifications so you don't miss the next one. Once you drop the excuses, something unexpected happens. The fear doesn't vanish, but it shrinks into something manageable. Instead of a giant, shapeless monster, it becomes a series of small, solvable problems. That's when the real enemy shows up, though. Not excuses anymore, but the myth you were taught about how money is supposed to work. And that myth is far more dangerous than being broke. Here's where things get uncomfortable fast. Most people aren't broke because they failed. They're broke because they followed the script exactly as it was handed to them. Go to school, work hard, be responsible, don't take risks, and someday things will work out. That story sounds safe, almost noble, but it leaves out a brutal detail. The world changed, and the script didn't. So when reality doesn't match the promise, people assume they are the problem. They're not. The instructions were incomplete. You were taught that money is something you earn after permission is granted. By a boss, a degree, a system. That belief quietly trains you to wait. Wait for raises, wait for stability, wait for confidence, wait until you're ready. Meanwhile, bills don't wait. Stress doesn't wait. Life doesn't wait. And the longer you stay in waiting mode, the more powerless you feel. That's not a character flaw. That's conditioning. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. Think about how strange this really is. We're taught to spend years learning how to make money, but almost zero time learning how to control it. Nobody teaches you how to manage cash flow, how to prioritize survival over status, or how to build stability before chasing growth. So people do what they think is progress. They upgrade phones, cars, lifestyles, because that's what successful adults look like. But underneath, the foundation is cracked. That's not adulthood, that's performance. Here's a sharp analogy that hits hard. Imagine trying to fill a bucket with a hole in it, while everyone around you keeps yelling, "Pour faster." That's modern personal finance. You don't need more water yet. You need to seal the hole. But sealing the hole isn't glamorous. It doesn't come with applause or dopamine hits. It comes with boring decisions, uncomfortable trade-offs, and saying no to things that make you look successful but keep you fragile. This is where frustration usually turns into self-attack. You might think, other people figure this out, why can't I? But most people don't figure it out. They normalize stress and call it adulthood. They laugh about being broke, joke about debt, and wear exhaustion like a badge of honor. That normalization is poison, because when pain becomes normal, change feels unnecessary. And when change feels unnecessary, nothing improves. Here's the part nobody warns you about. The biggest myth isn't that money buys happiness. The real myth is that money problems are solved by motivation. They're not. Motivation fades. Systems stay. What you need isn't a hype speech. It's a reset in how you see control, progress, and responsibility. And once that clicks, a new question takes center stage. If the myth is broken, what actually works when you're starting from zero? That question is the doorway. Because now the focus shifts from beliefs to behavior, from theory to actions that feel almost too simple to matter, yet change everything over time. Here's a mindset shift that quietly saves people. You don't need motivation. You need a floor. Motivation is emotional. It spikes, it crashes, it disappears the moment life gets loud. A floor is different. A floor is the minimum standard you refuse to fall below, no matter how you feel that day. When you're broke and overwhelmed, aiming high sounds inspiring, but it's usually counterproductive. Stability beats ambition at this stage, every single time. Think about how most people try to fix their finances. They wait for a burst of energy, a new plan, a fresh month. Then they promise themselves they'll be disciplined forever. That works for about a week. Then life happens. The discipline breaks, shame kicks in, and the cycle restarts. A floor doesn't care about perfect weeks. It only asks one question. What's the smallest set of behaviors that keeps you from sliding backward? For example, instead of saying, "I'm going to save aggressively," the floor might be, "Every bill gets paid on time, even if nothing else improves yet." Or, "I check my bank balance every morning, no matter how uncomfortable it feels." Or, "I stop adding new debt, full stop." These actions aren't exciting. They won't make you feel rich, but they quietly remove chaos. And chaos is what's been draining your energy all along. There's a strange psychological relief that comes from this. When the floor is solid, your nervous system calms down. You stop living in constant reaction mode. Suddenly, decisions don't feel like emergencies anymore. You're not asking, how do I get ahead? You're asking, how do I stay stable today? That sounds small, but it's powerful. Stability creates breathing room, and breathing room is where clear thinking returns. A lot of people resist this because it feels like settling. It's not. It's staging. Just like a builder doesn't start with the roof, you don't start with wealth. You start by making sure the ground won't collapse under you. Once that floor exists, something interesting happens. Opportunities become visible, not magical ones, practical ones. Side income ideas, expense cuts that don't hurt, habits that actually stick, and that opens the door to a deeper realization most people miss. Once the chaos is gone, you start noticing where your money is leaking silently, not dramatically. Not big mistakes, tiny, boring ones that repeat daily. And those tiny leaks, they're the next place real progress hides. When people imagine financial problems, they picture big disasters, a layoff, a medical bill, a sudden crisis. Those hurt, no doubt. But what keeps most people broke isn't the explosion, it's the drip. The $10 decisions that don't feel like decisions at all. Subscriptions you forgot, convenience spending you justify as necessary, small upgrades that whisper, "You deserve this." None of them ruin you alone. Together, they slowly suffocate your progress. Here's the tricky part. These leaks hide in plain sight because they feel harmless. A coffee here, a delivery fee there, a payment plan that feels manageable. The brain loves manageable pain. It avoids big discomfort by choosing small, repeated ones. And over time, those small choices create a monthly reality that feels unavoidable. You look at your bank account and think, I don't even spend that much. Yet somehow, there's never anything left. That's not a mystery. It's math plus habit. A mentor trick that actually works is the 30-day mirror. You don't change anything yet. You just track every dollar for 1 month. No judgment, no cutting, no fixing. Just observation. Most people are shocked, not because the numbers are worse than expected, but because they finally see patterns. The same behaviors, same days, same triggers, stress spending, convenience spending, reward spending. Awareness alone won't fix it, but it gives you leverage. Once you see the leaks, you don't plug them all at once. That's another trap. You choose one. Maybe it's food delivery during the week. Maybe it's impulse shopping late at night. Maybe it's subscriptions you never use. You shut down one leak and let your system adapt. This builds confidence without overwhelm. Progress that doesn't exhaust you is the kind that lasts. What's fascinating is what happens emotionally. As the leaks close, even slightly, your relationship with money shifts. You stop seeing it as something that disappears and start seeing it as something that responds to your behavior. That's a quiet but profound change. Control stops feeling abstract. It feels earned, and that's when the next challenge appears. With fewer leaks, you're left with a new question. If spending less isn't enough on its own, how do you increase income without burning out or gambling on unrealistic ideas? That's where things get interesting. At some point, everyone hears the same suggestion. You just need to make more money. It sounds obvious, almost insulting. And here's the twist. It's not wrong. It's just out of order. Telling someone who's overwhelmed to earn more is like telling a drowning person to swim harder. They're already exhausted. Without structure, extra income doesn't create relief. It creates new pressure, new decisions, and new ways to mess things up. Most people imagine income growth as this clean, heroic leap, a better job, a side hustle that takes off, a sudden breakthrough. But in reality, income grows best when your life can handle it. If your schedule is chaotic, your energy is low, and your finances are disorganized, more money feels heavier, not lighter. That's why so many people get raises and still feel broke 6 months later. The container didn't change, only the volume. Here's a more grounded way to think about it. Income should be boring before it's exciting. The first goal isn't freedom or passion, it's predictability. Something small, repeatable, and slightly uncomfortable but not overwhelming. Think over time, once a week. Freelance work that uses a skill you already have. Selling something simple online. Nothing glamorous. Just proof that you can create money intentionally, not accidentally. For example, someone who's good at organizing might help local businesses clean up spreadsheets. Someone decent with words might edit resumes or write short descriptions. Someone reliable might take on weekend work temporarily. These aren't dream jobs. They're stepping stones. And stepping stones matter because they rebuild self-trust. You stop saying, "I hope money shows up," and start saying, "I know how to make it show up." Once that belief forms, something shifts internally. You're no longer at the mercy of your paycheck alone. Even a small extra stream changes how you walk through the world. But here's the warning most people ignore. As income increases, sabotage often follows. Lifestyle creep, overconfidence, sloppy decisions. That's why the next topic matters more than motivation. It's about protecting progress from yourself. This is where progress quietly dies for a lot of people. Not because they fail, but because things start to feel better. A little extra money comes in, stress eases up, and the urgency fades. The brain relaxes and says, "See, we're fine now." That's the invisible villain, comfort without structure. It convinces you the problem is solved when it's only paused. Self-sabotage doesn't look dramatic. It looks like small rewards justified by recent effort. I worked hard. I deserve this. This one purchase won't matter. I'll get serious again next month. These thoughts aren't evil. They're human, but they're dangerous because they slowly erase momentum. The gains you made don't vanish overnight. They leak away, just like before. Only now it's harder to notice. A powerful protection strategy is separating identity from income spikes. You're not doing great because one month went well, and you're not failing because the next one is tight. Progress lives in consistency, not peaks. That's why systems matter more as things improve, not less. Automated savings, fixed rules around spending increases, clear boundaries on lifestyle upgrades. Boring, yes. Effective, absolutely. There's also an emotional layer here most people don't talk about. When you've been broke for a long time, stability can feel unfamiliar, even uncomfortable. Chaos becomes home. So when things calm down, part of you unconsciously recreates stress because it feels normal. Recognizing that pattern is huge. It turns self-judgment into self-awareness, and awareness gives you a choice. Once you learn to protect progress, growth stops feeling fragile. You don't panic when things wobble slightly. You trust your process. And that's when patience becomes your greatest weapon. Because real change doesn't explode, it compounds quietly. That leads straight into the next shift most people underestimate. Learning to respect slow progress instead of resenting it. Here's something nobody warns you about. Slow progress can feel more frustrating than no progress at all. When nothing is working, at least you have an excuse. But when things improve just a little, your patience gets tested. You're paying bills, stress is lower, but you're still far from where you want to be. And that gap messes with your head. You start thinking, "I'm doing everything right, so why isn't life changing faster?" This is where a lot of people quit. Not because it's hard, but because it's boring. Slow progress doesn't trigger dopamine. There's no applause for consistency. No one celebrates the month you didn't go into debt or the week you said no to impulse spending. But those are the exact moments where identity shifts. You're no longer someone trying to change. You're someone who does things differently, even when it's inconvenient. Think of it like learning a new language. At first, every word feels clumsy. You want fluency fast, but real fluency comes from repetition, not intensity. Money works the same way. Saving a small amount, earning a modest extra income, sticking to rules that feel almost too simple. That's how financial confidence forms. Not from dramatic wins, but from quiet proof repeated over time. There's a mindset flip that helps here. Instead of asking, "Is this making me rich yet?" you ask, "Is this making me stronger?" Stronger habits, stronger boundaries, stronger emotional control around money. When the answer is yes, you're winning, even if your bank balance doesn't scream it yet. Strength shows up before results do. Once you truly accept slow progress, something powerful happens. You stop rushing decisions. You stop chasing shortcuts. And that opens the door to a moment most people never reach. The moment where you clearly see which version of you you're becoming. And that leads directly into the next divide that changes everything. At this stage, a line starts forming, even if no one talks about it out loud. On one side are people who stabilize, then slowly build. On the other are people who stabilize, get comfortable, and stop. The difference isn't intelligence, luck, or opportunity. It's a single, repeated decision. Do you use relief to grow, or do you use relief to relax? Both feel justified. Only one changes your life. This is where worlds quietly divide. In one world, you treat stability as a launch pad. You ask better questions. You plan a little further ahead. You start thinking in years instead of pay periods. In the other world, stability becomes the finish line. You tell yourself you've earned rest, and you have. But rest turns into drift. Not dramatic drift, gentle drift. The kind that feels harmless until you look back and realize nothing really moved. A mentor once described this as standing on an escalator that's going down. If you walk up, you barely notice progress. If you stand still, you slowly descend. Most people don't choose to go backward. They just stop walking. That's the danger zone. When effort decreases but expenses, expectations, and life pressure keep rising, you don't feel broke again right away. You feel uneasy. That unease is the warning most people ignore. Here's where awareness becomes power. You start noticing how often you delay small improvements because things are okay now. You catch yourself postponing learning, planning, or refining systems. And instead of shaming yourself, you pause and ask a better question. Which future does this choice belong to? That question alone can stop years of quiet regression. Because once you see the split, you can't unsee it. Every decision votes for one version of your life. And that realization leads to the final internal shift, the moment where responsibility stops feeling like a burden and starts feeling like freedom. That moment is closer than you think. Something subtle but profound happens at this stage. Responsibility, which once felt like a crushing weight, begins to feel lighter. Not because life is suddenly easy, but because you're no longer fighting reality. Before, responsibility sounded like blame. It's all on you. Now it sounds like leverage. It's in your hands. That shift changes how you carry problems. They stop feeling personal and start feeling practical. You notice it in small moments. A bill arrives and instead of panic, there's a pause. A choice comes up, and instead of reacting, you think it through. You're not fearless. You're grounded. That grounding doesn't come from confident speeches or positive thinking. It comes from evidence. You've seen yourself do hard, boring, unglamorous things consistently, and once your brain has proof, it stops screaming for escape routes. Here's the irony. This is usually when people realize they were never bad with money. They were untrained, overwhelmed, and emotionally exhausted. Money magnifies habits, not character. When habits improve, self-respect follows naturally. You stop needing motivation because your identity has shifted. You're no longer someone trying to get it together. You're someone who handles things, even when they're uncomfortable. There's also a quiet confidence that shows up here. You don't need to explain yourself as much. You don't chase every new idea. You don't compare your timeline to other people's highlight reels. You understand that stability gave you control, control gave you options, and options gave you peace. Not flashy peace, steady peace. The kind that doesn't disappear when life throws a curveball. And this is where the loop closes back on itself in a powerful way. Because once responsibility feels like power, you start asking better questions again. Not desperate ones, not fearful ones, intentional ones. Questions about growth, direction, and purpose. Questions that would have felt impossible when you were overwhelmed and broke. That's the real transformation. Not just escaping financial stress, but becoming the kind of person who doesn't fall apart when pressure shows up. And from here, everything else, wealth, freedom, choice, becomes a byproduct, not a chase.